Suppose you were an idiot, and suppose you were a member of Congress. But I repeat myself. Mark Twain, American writer, humorist, essayist, entrepreneur, publisher, and lecturer. All right. Welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. You know, there are times when I'm out and about looking around at different things and something appears one way and I dig in and I'm like, I kind of got that wrong. I like it appeared to be a negative thing or a positive thing, and it happened to be something other, right? Like if it at first appeared positive, then it maybe have turned out negative and vice versa. And then there are times where you see something and you're immediately like, what's this about? And you're kind of skeptical, right? Your spidey senses are kind of tingling and you're just like, hmm. And then you dig in and you're like, whoa, this is way worse. This is way worse than I thought. Well, that's what happened to me. I saw this video clip pop up on social media the other day. It's probably like a week ago. I can't remember exactly how long, but I saw this clip. I want to play just a few seconds of it just to give you a gist. We're going to walk through it. It's like a 5-minute clip in total, but we're going to walk through it and we're going to see what's going on. So the gist today is Congress they love to grandstand, right? Now, if you've ever watched a congressional hearing, you probably needed some medication, like one to get you through it or something. I don't know. You needed something because they can be boring. But every now and then a clip gets out and you're like, whoa, Congress really took that, CEO or whoever, they took them to task where they really gave it to them. And it turns out that most of the time, they're not really giving it to them. In fact, you might remember when Mark Zuckerberg was on, it was like 2018 or something like that. And they brought him in and I think it's the Senate hearing, and they were asking him all these questions about security. And it was clear that the Senate members had no idea what they were talking about because they were like, well, they were like, Mr. Zuckerberg, if we're on WhatsApp, I think WhatsApp was the one in question. They're like, we're on WhatsApp and we're talking about this. Am I going to get an ad for this? And Zuckerberg was like, so we don't have access to those particular conversations. So no. And they're like, and then I don't remember who it was, but they were like, okay. But what I'm saying is if I'm discussing going to this protest or discussing this, will I receive like an ad on my phone when I'm scrolling through Facebook? And Zuckerberg's like, so again, we don't have access to these private conversations. They're encrypted. And it was clear that the Senate members just didn't know what they were talking about, right? Then there was one, you may or may not have seen this one, Katie Porter, and I don't remember where she's out of, but Katie Porter was grilling Jamie Dimon from, I can't remember which bank it was at the moment, but she's grilling him and she makes up this fictitious worker. And she's like, all right, well, it looks like your bank has a minimum wage or not a minimum wage, but a starting salary of this much money. It was like $16 an hour or something like that. And then so she's going through and she's like got one of those, Congress members will have like this big, huge like poster board and they'll have like information on it. And then so she's like going through, and I think she actually had a whiteboard. She's like going through and she's like, okay, so she makes $16 an hour. And then it costs roughly this much money if she wants to, buy groceries. And it costs this much money to make her car payment. And she's going down the line. And then she shows that at $16 an hour, this person who might be working for his bank as like a teller ends up being in the negative, and she doesn't have, this person doesn't have enough money. So it's funny, and I saw this clip because a friend of mine, Dan Berman, he did a video of this and he walks through and he points out that at no time does Representative Porter um, point out the taxes that she has to pay, that this fictitious person might have to pay, right? Like there was no inclusion of taxes. And so he goes through and he's like, he estimates that if you included taxes, that this fictitious person, if they had not had their taxes taken out at the end of the month, they actually could be at a surplus with all those same numbers, right? And so this is all just a bunch of show. And I don't know that people really get the gist of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm kind of going to yeah, that's really, really good standard, awesome English there, right? I'm going to defend pharmaceutical companies to an extent here. And it's okay because the greater evil here in this particular case is the grandstanding by Congressman Khanna. What's his first name? Ro Khanna, Congressman Ro Khanna. And he's in this hearing, and there are a bunch of lawyers from different companies, and he starts asking some questions. So let's play this clip really quickly here. Let's see here. Let me get some things up on the screen, and I'm just going to play a few seconds of it. Okay, so we're not gonna play the whole thing. All right, so let's see here. Let's get this, and let's play just a few seconds to give you a gist, and then we're going to walk through it.
What drug does Imbruvica? What does it treat?
Congressman, I recognize Imbruvica is one of the products that we do market. I'm not exactly sure.
It's
what it
okay.
treats.
I'm not trying to trick you. It treats leukemia. Do you know what the price that Johnson and Johnson has set for it?
I do not have that on my
It's
fingertips.
it's $484 per capsule per tablet, which works out to about $14,000 per month, which works out to about $16,000, $160,000 per year for leukemia patients. Now, do you know, or I can tell you, how much money, gross revenue, the Johnson and Johnson has made from this drug over the last 10 years?
Congressman, it's not something that I'm an expert at, not something
Sure.
I'm here to testify to today.
$22 billion. Do you know the gross profits of Johnson and Johnson in 2023?
I couldn't tell you that.
$65 billion. So just to
Okay. So it sounds like this is the clip that's on, that was floating around social media, right? And let's see. This person says, Wow, I wonder why I haven't heard of him." And let's see here. Let's get this a little bit better up on the screen here so you can see it. And let's see what we got. We're in Canada with my husband going through leukemia treatments. I'm shocked at the cost of the drugs in the U.S. How does the average American survive, right? So this person was just being funny. He's like, "Whoa, how much did it cost to develop that leukemia medication?" And so people are going through and they're just, the greed is astounding. Thank you for the information. He's Ro Khanna from California. I think I occasionally see him on Sunday shows. It's very important questions and proves to me that these companies are about gouging customers or consumers. Why can't she answer these questions, right? Like this is amazing because like he does. Oh, you know what? I didn't click there. How about that? All right. So like here's that person. They're like, why can't she answer these questions? She does look dumb, right? Like she's like, I don't have that on my fingertips. Well, as it turns out, the reason that she couldn't answer them is because that's not what she was there to do. You might be like, "What? Wait a minute, like, no, she was there for an entirely separate purpose." So I had to think about how I'm gonna how we're gonna walk through this. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna play, uh, you know, let's do it this way. Let me play the opening from the chair. Now, this was like a 4-hour congressional hearing, oversight committee hearing. It's actually committee hearing, not a congressional hearing. So it was a committee hearing. And so let me play the opening from the chair, like 1 minute clip. And then I'm going to play an opening from this woman. Her name is Aviva Ween. And then we're going to walk through this exchange between Ween and Kana. Okay, so let's play this chair's opening, and let me adjust my audio settings just a little bit there. Okay, I think that should be good. Okay, perfect. All right, let's do this.
The Committee on Oversight and Accountability will come to order, and I want to welcome everyone.
All right, Committee on Oversight and Accountability. Okay, keep that in mind.
Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I recognize myself for an opening statement. Today, we examine a growing concern in our nation's legal system. Millions of lawsuits are filed each year. These suits range from simple disputes between neighbors to complex multi-district litigation spanning the entire country. Many of these lawsuits have significant merit, requiring serious analysis by courts, but some are frivolous as well. With the millions of cases being brought each year, our courts have become overburdened, creating delays and making it difficult and expensive for many litigants to prosecute their cases. The complexity and expense of some of these cases makes litigation funding important. In fact, for some, litigation funding is necessary to enable them to pursue justice through the legal system. But there are some concerning trends in how litigation is funded.
Okay, so there are concerning trends about how litigation. Did you notice what he's talking? He's talking about litigation. This is the chair of the committee opening the meeting by discussing that there are issues with litigation. Okay, keep that in mind. Now let's go and let's play Ween's opening statement. And then I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm just going to play a clip of it because, again, these meetings can kind of be very dry, but then you get like this little juicy clip that it gets tossed out on social media, and everybody's like, "Man, why can't that dummy answer any questions? Like, what is she trying to hide?" Right? Well, we're gonna figure out what she's trying to hide, if anything. All right. So here's Aviva Ween with her opening statement.
Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, and members of the committee. My name is Aviva Ween, and I'm an Assistant General Counsel at Johnson & Johnson, and I lead our litigation policy and risk mitigation group.
Okay. She leads the litigation policy and risk mitigation group. Okay. that's what she does. Risk mitigation and risk mitigation and litigation policy, right? So in other words, when people file lawsuits against Johnson & Johnson, that's her.
I applaud your committee's efforts to shine light on the growing threat to our civil justice system and the U.S. economy. Outside money and influence over mass tort litigation are compromising the ability of both plaintiffs and defendants to achieve justice. And federal courts are struggling to manage the barrage of cases fairly and efficiently. These concerns threaten the integrity of the civil justice system and are among the most significant challenges facing companies that manufacture critical life-saving and life-enhancing medicines and medical devices. I appreciate your inviting me here to testify today. My views are informed by my work, first at a law firm, and then for the past approximately 11 years handling product litigation for Johnson & Johnson.
Product litigation, okay? This is when people sue Johnson & Johnson. Now, I'm not making a judgment on whether or not people should sue or whether or not she does her job well. We're just simply establishing who the woman is. What is her role at Johnson & Johnson? Okay, and her role is to lead the department that deals with litigation against the company. That's what she does.
Johnson. There may have been a time when tort litigation was about individuals seeking out a lawyer to vindicate his or her rights and to recover for wrongfully caused harms. That's how civil justice is supposed to work. Today's mass tort system, however, works in reverse. Lawyers develop a tort theory, recruit investors, use that money to advertise for plaintiffs, work with paid experts to publish junk science, and amass thousands of claims without proper vetting. All of this has one intended result: profit to the lawyers and the investors. That is not how the civil justice system should work.
Okay. So what she's saying is she's making this claim, and it goes on for a few more minutes, but she's making a claim and she's saying, look, right now, it's not as simple as somebody was harmed. They seek out a lawyer to get compensation from a company that potentially would be liable for their harm. What she's saying is that lawyers now have this like industry where they go out and they look for areas that they can sue. And she's making the claim that they publish junk science. They seek out potential people to gather together and then sue pharmaceutical companies, which is not how the system is supposed to work according to her. Okay. So this entirety here, everything is about tort reform, right? It's about litigation against companies. In fact, let's pull this up on the screen here. So here's where the video comes from. So this is the oversight committee's website. Okay, you can go and find it. Unsuitable litigation. This is the title of the meeting. Unsuitable litigation, oversight of third-party litigation funding. Okay. Has nothing to do with any particular drug or the profits that maybe the company should have made or should not have made. And this is dated September 13th, 2023. So that's when this meeting was on September 13th of last year. Okay. So now you have an idea of what this meeting is about. It's about reform. And you've got a bunch of lawyers there that are coming and they're saying, look, we would like Congress to deal with this because people keep suing us. And in some cases, it's fair. In other cases, it's not. And when it's not, because there's this huge industry, it basically siphons money from us that could have better uses. So think of it this way. And again, I'm not really defending the position per se. I'm just simply establishing what is it that they're doing and what she's doing there is coming before Congress, coming before this committee to say, hey, look, when people sue us, we have to spend money to defend ourselves. And there is a business now that has been created to sue people. Remember back in the day, we used to call it like ambulance chasers. Like these lawyers would go and the moment somebody would, the slightest injury, they'd be like, wow, I bet I can get you $1 billion, maybe not a billion, but they would say, I bet you I can get you a lot of money. Right. And so she's saying this industry has basically been established to try and find ways to get money from a company. In other words, it's not me saying, "Hey, I took this drug and I got really sick and you didn't tell me about it." It's not what she's saying. What she's saying is somebody came to me and said, "Hey, DL, did you not feel well? Somehow I found out that, maybe I just do it in a commercial, but, maybe you took this drug, right? And maybe you got sick from it. You might have a claim." And we've seen those commercials, right? Have you used this drug? Well, you may be entitled to compensation, right? They are reaching out. So in as much as we want to complain about how pharmaceuticals are direct to consumer advertising, like, hey, maybe this drug is right for you, she's making the same claim that many law firms are now basically directly seeking out customers by saying, hey, did you ever take this drug? Well, maybe you got a claim. I mean, what does that even mean? Maybe you got a claim. Why would you have a claim? They don't even know you yet, right? And so they're suggesting that there may be a claim. And so this is what she's there to do. So let's get into this 5-minute clip of Ween and Kana kind of having this exchange. And we're going to take a look at some information along the way. So let's see what we got here. Okay, that's not it. Hold on here. What do we got? Let's try it again. Let's see here. Why are you not working? That's weird. What?
I'd like to yield
There
to
you
the
go.
chair, recognize Mr. Connor from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Ween, what drug does Imbruvica, what does it treat?
Congressman, I recognize Imbruvica is one of the products that we do market. I'm not exactly sure.
It's
what it
okay.
treats.
I'm not trying to trick you. It
Okay. I'm not trying to trick you. Actually, Congressman, you are. Because as I've already established, she's not there to talk about a specific drug. So he's literally asking her one of those gotcha questions right now. Like this, this is what he starts off with. He's like, hey, what about this drug Imbruvica? Now, what about Imbruvica? I'll have the links in the show notes. The White House put out something and they said, here are the first 10 drugs that we're going to try to negotiate, which he talks about later. And this happens to be one of them. Okay. But again, she's not there to talk about negotiating drugs or any drugs in specific. She's there to talk about litigation that may be out of control, that might need some sort of Congress, oversight or something.
treats leukemia. Do you know what the price that Johnson & Johnson has set for it?
I do not have that on my
It's
fingertips.
it's $484 per capsule per tablet, which works out to about $14,000 per month, which works out to about $160,000 per year for leukemia patients.
Okay, so that sounds bad, right? Because he's like, man, this pill is $480 a pill. Like, can you believe this? And it's like $14,000 a month and $160,000 a year for a leukemia patient. Like, like he's evoking some sympathy here because, like, really, does anybody want a leukemia patient to have to pay $160,000 so they don't die? That's basically the message that he's giving here. Okay, let's continue.
Now, do you know, or I can tell you, how much money, gross revenue, the Johnson & Johnson has made from this drug over the last 10 years?
Congressman, it's not something that I'm an expert at, not something
Sure.
I'm here to testify to today.
$22 billion. Do you know the gross profits of Johnson & Johnson in 2023?
I couldn't tell you that.
$65 billion. So just to recap, you've got a pill for leukemia patients. You sell it at $484 per capsule. That's $160,000 a year. You've made $22 billion over the last 10 years, and you're making $65 billion in profit. Now, we have passed as a Congress, and the president has signed a bill saying.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it right here before he gets into this next segment because he's done throwing numbers at her, except he didn't throw other numbers that might be more relevant or might be I don't want to say more relevant, but relevant. So let's take a look at some numbers that he kind of left off. So let's take a look here. What we're looking at here. So this is from Statista. This is Johnson & Johnson's expenditure on research and development from 2005. Now, this is in millions, okay? So you have to take every one of these numbers and you multiply them by millions. So we can see that in 2022, and this graph only goes up to 2022, but in 2022, they spent $14 billion in research. $14 billion in research. Now, he asked her about like how much profit did they make from Imbruvica over 10 years, and it was like 22 million, I think is what he said. Yeah, he said no, $22 billion gross revenue. Okay. But he doesn't ask, he doesn't say like, what's your research and development budget been like over the last 10 years? So if we go the last 10 years on this chart, we actually end up with $108 billion that Johnson & Johnson has put into research and development. Now, let me ask you, where does that $108 billion come from? If you said from the money that they make from other drugs, go to the head of the class. That money has to come from somewhere. Now, not all of the drugs that they produce not all the drugs do they produce end up being super duper profitable. And this is the way it is in many industries. Like I remember years ago, the music industry supposedly, and I don't have a citation for this, so I could be wrong, but I believe that I remember reading about how the music industry would spend like millions and millions of dollars to promote artists, and only some of them bring a return, which means you might spend a lot of money producing a particular drug, and then that drug ends up, for whatever reason, maybe it doesn't pass FDA, maybe it turns out that the research and development, you thought it was going to go in a particular direction, and then you end up finding out that, hey, this drug isn't so useful, for this particular purpose, but maybe it's useful for another one, and this other purpose ends up not being nearly as profitable because simply not nearly as many people need it, right? So you could, in theory, say like they're spending all this money, and how many drugs, like this would be my question for Representative Khanna, if since he seems to be up on the up and up with all of his research, I would ask him, out of that $108 billion that they spent over the last 10 years from this chart, how many drugs did they spend it on, and how many drugs ended up being profitable, right? Because I'm willing to bet that he doesn't have the answer, because he only looked up enough to try and make Aviva look bad by asking her questions that were not relevant to her purpose. Okay, so let's get back to this media. Let's go back to this clip, and we'll continue watching.
You know what? Let Medicare negotiate to try to bring that price down. And you, in your department, because you're assistant general counsel,
Okay, so now he's not even being on. He's like, you're assistant general counsel, but she has a specific department. It is litigation. And she is there to talk about law firms that have created an industry to try and sue drug companies, basically this version of ambulance chasers. That's what she's there for, and that's what she does. She does not handle the R&D or the drug sales. She might know about them. I presume that she does, right? Like nobody's going before Congress and has no idea about other parts of the company. So it would be absurd to think that she has no idea, but that's not what she's there for, nor is it um, nor is it part of her department. And she says that early on. She's like, this is not what I'm here to testify about. But he continues.
filed a lawsuit saying that that negotiation would be an unjust taking. Let me ask you this. Do you believe when the Veterans Administration negotiates for drug prices with you that that is a violation of the takings clause?
Congressman, I appreciate the question. The bases for our litigation against HHS with respect to the Inflation Reduction Act are fully disclosed in our complaint. I'm not an expert in this area.
You're here, you're the assistant general counsel for
So again,
a company that is accusing the United States government of taking your property.
okay, so let's pause that right here. He's like, you're the assistant general counsel for a company that's accusing the United States of taking your property. So what he's talking about in the takings clause is the government, according to the Constitution, has to provide just compensation before they can just take your stuff. This is kind of like the whole, like, if my house is in the way of a highway development and the highway is for public purposes, then the government can come and use eminent domain to take my stuff. But before they do that, they have to offer me just pay compensation for my house. So if my house is worth, like, say, $100,000 on the market, they can't just come and give me like, $2,000, right? Like that would be a violation of the Constitution. And so he's saying, like, your company is suing the government. He starts to get a little indignant here, right? Because he's like, well, you're suing us, and you don't know these answers. No, the company she works for is suing them. I don't know if she is part of that lawsuit. I assume that she has read it, because she clarifies and says, like, all of that information is in our filed paperwork against the government, right? Like, it's there. So I assume that she knows what it says, right? Again, you don't go before Congress and have no idea about other parts of your company. That just wouldn't make sense. You would be a very poor representative. But that doesn't mean that when you're there, that you're there to talk about anything that Congress members want to throw at you. And this is what I mean by saying this man, this congressman, Mr. Khanna, is being he's out of line. Effectively, like if we wanted to be like in parliamentary terms, he's out of order in a sense because he's basically badgering her. Like he's not asking her relevant questions to why she's even there. He's just decided to go in some other direction because it's going to create some nice juicy clips, which we saw running around all over the media. And then people are like, well, why can't she answer the questions? It's not that she can't. It's not what she's there for. All right, let's continue.
Because we're negotiating, and you can't answer a simple question about, I'm just a yes or a no. Does the Veterans Affairs negotiation with Johnson & Johnson constitute a taking?
Okay. So he's like, is this a taking? Because the takings clause is a specific phrase. And it's called a taking, right? And so he's like, what about this Veterans Affairs? Like, and we're just negotiating. And we're going to get to this whole notion of negotiating. Okay. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But you see what he's doing here? He starts off and he says, what's this drug do? And she's like, well, yeah, I'm not really sure about that particular drug. And she's like, I'm familiar with it. She's a lawyer, right? She's not a pharmacist. She's a lawyer. And he's like, well, it's a drug for leukemia. This is how much it cost. This is how much you guys made, right? Like, do you see the framing of this conversation by Representative Khanna? He's framing it very emotionally, right? And then he leaves out relevant information. Like if I have to spend $1 billion to research for drugs and I'm researching multiple drugs at a time, then there's a good chance that I need lots of money to be able to fund my research and fund the company, right? Like, and she's there to talk about, hey, in part of our funding the company, we're defending ourselves against frivolous lawsuits. So therefore, Congress, would you do something about it? Now, we could have a conversation whether Congress should do anything, but based on this so far, 2 minutes in, maybe she shouldn't be asking Congress. Maybe she should be like, look, Congress, can you get the hell out of the way? Because you clearly can't seem to be man, my English is just terrible today. But they might want to just look at it and say, you aren't willing to do anything other than grandstand. So therefore, get out of the way at least. Anyway, let's continue.
Congressman, we believe that the IRA constrains
No, I
medical
don't,
innovation.
I'm not asking about that. I'm asking you about, do you believe the Veterans Affairs, when they negotiate, does that constitute a taking?
Congressman, again, that is not a litigation that I have great familiarity
Okay,
with.
so I'll just say you don't want to answer that question. Do you?
See, again, you don't want to answer it. Now, maybe she can, I don't know, but she shouldn't, because that is, again, not her purpose. I like this how I stopped it. He looks like a buffoon because he is. But that's not her purpose there. And this is in another area, right? Now, the IRA that she's talking about is the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act passed by President Biden, that allows Congress to basically say, for Medicare, we're going to negotiate, and we're going to get to this term, we're going to negotiate these drug prices because $484 for a pill, that's just too much. And we got to do something about it. Like, you clearly are just price gouging for poor little patients who have leukemia, right? So the government's going to come in and they're going to do something about it. And he's framing it now as like, but if we're just negotiating, is that really taking your property? Like, come on. Now, he knows that she's not there to answer these questions. He can't possibly be that dumb. I mean, but then maybe, I don't know. But let's assume that he's at least not that dumb, right? He knows what she's there for. She's there to talk about litigation, tort reform. That's what the entire meeting is about. It's not about the Inflation Reduction Act and the fact that this legislation allows the government to, quote unquote, negotiate prices on behalf of patients. That's not what she's there for, but that's what he wants to talk about. So let's continue.
I believe when Medicaid negotiates and gets a rebate for anything over the price of inflation, do you believe that that constitutes a taking?
Congressman, again, it's not an area that I specialize in.
I guess I don't understand how, being the Assistant General Counsel, you can come before the United States Congress when you're suing the United States government saying that we are taking your property. Oh, that's a very serious charge.
It sure as hell is. And you know what, Mr. Congressman? It's one that you should take damn serious and stop being so indignant. because we have a constitution that provides, I don't want to say it provides, but it enshrines rights that the American people have. And the Constitution, the Fifth Amendment, I believe it's the Fifth Amendment that this applies to, the Fifth Amendment, where the takings clauses, it says that Congress has limits. Congress cannot do a thing unless this happens, right? So you can't take my stuff without offering me just compensation. And if you do, I have a complaint against you. And furthermore, the First Amendment says we, the people, have the right to bring grievances. Nowhere in the Constitution does it suggest that Congress should be indignant when a claim is made against them. Nowhere. In fact, it's not written directly, nor would you get that impression if you actually read the Constitution and recognized it for what it is, which is a limit on government that prevents the government from unjustly harming the rights or impeding the rights of the people. That's what it's for. It is entirely a document that says, here are your limitations, full stop. And people can make complaints about them to you. They can complain about them via free speech, and there's nothing you can do. And so to act indignant, like, well, that's a big deal. It sure as hell is. And you better take it seriously. All right.
Taking means like if I came as the government with the force, took your property, and you don't know whether it's a taking, when the Veterans Administration negotiates, you don't know whether it's a taking, whether Medicaid negotiates. I assume you'd say it's not a taking, because obviously it's not a taking.
Okay, so stop right there. This guy, I tell you what, I'm telling you, he needs to be thrown out on his ass, like physically, not, and I know we're not supposed to say these kind of things, but the reality is his constituents, they need to see this for what it really is. He's making up a bunch of BS. He's like, you can't or won't answer the question. It's because that's not what she's there for. And he's like, well, we're not really taking your stuff because it's so obvious. No, it is not obvious. There's literally legislation, or not legislation. There's literally filed court documents from the company against the U.S. that makes this claim. It's like a 48-page document. I read through it. It's a 48-page document. And we're going to look at it in a minute. 48 pages of this is why the government is wrong. They are violating the limits that the Constitution has put on them, right? That's why we have a court system, so that I can bring a grievance and say, hey, Congress has overstepped its boundaries. So this idea of like, it's obviously not a taking. No, it is not obvious, sir. All right.
These administrations have been negotiating for years.
That is not true. We'll continue.
And yet you're arguing that Medicare should, when they negotiate, it's a taking. Medicaid, do you know how many % of the American population is on Medicare?
Okay, so you know what? Let me back up a little bit, because I want to make sure we don't lose sight of this. So let me go and pull up this article here, and let's see. This is the one from Reuters, right? No, that's not Reuters. So CNBC. All right, so let me pull this up on the screen here so that you can see it, because I want to make sure that I just made a claim and I said he was absolutely lying. So let's take a look at this. So we're going to cut over to here, and we're going to look at this article here. Now, this article is from CNBC, and it's dated July 18th, 2023. And it says, Johnson & Johnson sues Biden administration over Medicare drug price negotiations. So I want to scroll down here. And let's see, there was a particular, where is it here? All right. So right here, I'm going to highlight it just so that everybody can see it. Okay. Okay. We're going to highlight just a little bit here. Let's see if we did it this way. There. President Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. This is why she said IRA. And he's like, oh, I don't want to talk about the IRA. That's why she's talking about it, because that's what he's talking about. President Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act which passed in 2022 by a narrow party line vote, empowered Medicare to negotiate drug prices for the first time in the program's 6-decade history. First time, right? They haven't been. So let's go back and take a look at what he says here, because he was absolutely lying. Let's see here. Let's go back to this.
Negotiating for years. Administration negotiates. You don't know whether it's a taking, whether Medicaid negotiates. I assume you'd say it's not a taking, because obviously it's not a taking. These administrations have been negotiating for years, and yet you're arguing.
Okay, so see what he said? He's like, we've been doing this for years. No, you haven't. This is new. It hasn't done it. It literally says right there that this is the first time in Medicare's 6 decades, 60 years, that it has negotiated drug prices. So he's lying right there in committee. Okay, let's go back to it. Let's continue.
That Medicare should, when they negotiate, it's a taking. Medicaid, do you know how many % of the American population is on Medicare?
Congressman, no.
It's 18% about. Do you know how many are on Medicaid?
Congressman, no.
About 18%. So it's not like Medicare has a bigger market. Medicaid negotiates with 18%. Do you know about how much is on, how many of our people are veterans? It's about 6%. So you have already a larger population, when you combine Medicaid and Veterans Affairs, negotiating with your company so that you don't make $65 billion in profits every year. And so leukemia patients don't pay $160,000. You have filed a lawsuit. I think it is shameful what you and the pharmaceutical companies have done in suing the United States government to protect those profits. And you are totally unprepared to answer a single question about what the takings clause is and the justification for that lawsuit.
Okay. So again, let's take a look at this, because he's like, well, you know, he's very indignant about this idea that the that the company would sue him, well, not him, but Congress, right? And he's like, and you shouldn't make $65 billion in profits. Somebody should ask Representative Khanna, if they don't make $65 billion in profits, right? If they don't make a lot of money, how in the hell does he expect their research and development to spend $108 billion over 10 years to produce new drugs? And then he further wants to say, well, you came here and you're unprepared to answer any questions. But again, this committee hearing is about tort reform. It's about the lawyer, her and others are there to talk about and say, hey, would you do something about this industry of lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies that we claim is built on fictitious information and seeking out potential claimants? Like, they're there for an entirely different purpose. And yet this man is lying through his teeth, either through omission or directly. And he needs to be held accountable. Now, I just told you, well, you know, let's finish up. We only got like 27 seconds.
I mean, I really believe hopefully someone in the company and these other pharmaceutical companies can provide the American people with an explanation why you consider Medicare negotiating those drugs to lower those profits, those obscene profits, a taking, when you don't consider that for the Veterans Affairs Administration or Medicaid. Mr. Chairman, I hope someone will answer my questions on that, and I yield back my time.
Okay, so he wants an answer. He actually had an answer, right? She told him early on, she said, look, all the information that you need to know, she said it a little differently, but she said all the information you need to know is in the filing, right? About why we're doing this, what's going on. So let's pull that filing up, and let's read through it a little bit here, because, you know, I like doing some bill reviews and reading stuff that's, you know, above my pay grade, but we're going to go ahead and check it out. So let's pull this information up on the screen here. So this is the lawsuit that he was referring to. Now, again, this is not the lawsuit. This is not the document that she is there to discuss. She is not there to discuss this. Okay. But she did point out, like, hey, all the information you're looking for, well, it's in our filing. Like, you can go and read it. So let's see what it says. All right. For decades, federal law has supported a research and development ecosystem that has made the United States the world leader in pharmaceutical innovation. Okay, let's evaluate that. Do we recognize any other country as being a world leader when it comes to pharmaceutical research? No. Under that system, drugs that create where'd I go here? Under that system, drugs that achieve commercial success after extensive scientific development enable the creation of next generation pioneering medicines that change the way we fight diseases. Janssen, this is like a sister corporation or whatever, has made this patient driven innovation the cornerstone of its business. It invests tremendous resources in developing transformative medicines that address unmet medical needs and seeking cures to previously untreatable diseases such as cancers, autoimmune conditions, cardiovascular disease, HIV, and depression. Since 2016, now they're using a different time frame. Since 2016, Janssen has invested more than $65 billion in research and development. Now, he was just complaining about profits of 65 billion, but he doesn't seem to want to answer where exactly this money is going to come from. He's got a long list of questions and they're very selective. They're selective because he wants the public to side with him emotionally. Oh, you are charging these leukemia patients all this money and we need to come in and save the day. And how dare you say that we're taking your property? Okay, continuing on. Let's see. So since 2016, Janssen has invested more than 65 billion in research and development, resulting in Food and Drug Administration approvals for 8 new medications and 52 expanded indications or new formulations for existing medications. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. $65 billion and they got 8 new medications. Now, I don't know what those 8 are, so we will assume for the moment that these 8 new medications are for entirely different diseases. They spent $65 billion and all they were able to get is new medications for 8 diseases. Do you understand the problem here? It takes a lot of money to research and develop new medications. Now, this is aside from what you think of the processes and all this other stuff, right? These profits, they go into furthering the business, as they've already stated. The U.S. innovation ecosystem to which Janssen contributes has 2 vital components, both of which are severely threatened by the program. When they say the program, they mean the Inflation Reduction Act, and more specifically, this program that allows the government to select several drugs, a number of drugs, and say, we're negotiating. We're going to get to that. The first is the bargain at the heart of the patent and regulatory laws. When companies invest in and secure FDA approval for new treatments, they receive time limited and constitutionally safeguarded protections, including the exclusive rights to make and sell the new treatment. Now, I know my libertarian peers would argue about patents. We're not here to discuss that. We're simply saying this is what the lawsuit claims. This is the current environment that we are operating in. That's all we're saying right now. The second is the operation of the free market forces to establish prices for medicines during and after their patent terms. Together, these components strongly encourage risk taking and innovation to facilitate future breakthroughs. Okay, as a result of that system, patients have faster and broader access to pioneering treatments in the United States than in any other country. So, what they're saying is because of the way the system works now, we can put money into doing research, which provides nice new products for customers in a way that no other country can. All right. I'm pretty sure that's a fact. I'm pretty sure that there's nobody that really can argue and say, no, actually, this other country does a much better job of developing, researching, and developing new medications. No, the U.S. leads the way. All right, so let's continue on here. Okay. Tacitly admitting its unconstitutional overreach, Congress cloaked the program in deceptive terms. according to the act, the Inflation Reduction Act, manufacturers voluntarily, quote, agree to, quote, negotiate so-called, quote, fair prices for each drug selected for the program. In truth, those labels are nothing more than rhetorically appealing falsehoods. There is no genuine agreement, no real negotiation, and nothing fair about the price the government unilaterally dictates. This is the heart of their claim. Let's see. Yet, the program's negotiations result in the government agency that selects the drugs for the program unilaterally setting the price it will pay. Okay. So he went on and on, grandstanding about, oh, well, how dare you, the veterans and leukemia patients, and we're just trying to negotiate. But here the claim is it's not really a negotiation because you're coming to us and saying, here are the drugs that we've selected that we're going to change the pay, and this is how much we're going to pay. That's it. That's our negotiation. Okay. Now, there's more to it. Let's go. Nor is the participation in the program voluntary. The government has gone to great lengths to mislead the public on that point, doubling down on voluntariness rhetoric in its final guidance and related statements to generate a carefully crafted smokescreen. Under the Act, a manufacturer may only escape from the program's mandates and penalties by withdrawing all of its products from Medicare and Medicaid, not just the drug selected for the program. That provision is the legal equivalent of a gun to the head because it would require a manufacturer to give up access to nearly 40% of the US healthcare market. What they are saying is that the government has instituted this program where they will say, here are the drugs that we're selecting for negotiation. Here is how much we're going to pay you for it. If you don't agree, by the way, they didn't say, do you care about these drugs? There was no negotiation on which drugs. They just selectively chose them unilaterally. Then they said, we're going to pay you this much money through the Medicare program. And then they said, if you don't agree to this, well, then you have to, then you can't participate in the Medicare program at all. Zero, right? That's not a negotiation. All right, so let's continue on. Let's see, we're on page 4. We got one more here. Manufacturers who remain on Medicare and Medicaid are subject to crippling penalties if they do not submit to the government's term a tax of 186% to 1900% of a selected drug's daily domestic revenues until the manufacturer agrees to participate in the supposedly voluntary program. What they're saying is, if we don't agree to this and we continue on, you will simply fine us daily until we give in. That's not a negotiation. We have to think of it this way. Imagine the government come to you and said, Mrs. Jones, we need your house because we're trying to put a new rail station through or a new highway through, right? A new railway or new highway, whatever. And Miss Jones says, yeah, no, I've lived here forever and I'm not giving you my property. And then they say, okay, look, let's negotiate. We're going to tell you that you can have $100,000 for your home. Now, assume that the home could sell on the market for $200,000, but we're going to sell it. We're going to buy it for $100,000. We call that fair. And if you don't pay us, well, then we're going to fine you every day, a daily fine. We're going to give you a daily fine. It's going to accrue. And you have to pay that. And if you and you will pay that until you agree to our terms. Does that sound like a negotiation to you? Not to me. Doesn't sound like one to me. Now, again, we can talk about prices and all that other good stuff. But right now, we're talking about the indignant nature of a congressman running his mouth at a hearing that's for something entirely different. All right, I got a few more things in here. So let's skip through. Let's go to page 21 here. Oh, there we go. Let's go back to this. All right. In short, when the government selects a manufacturer's drug for the program, the manufacturer faces the following purported alternatives. Number one, sign the manufacturer agreement to negotiate, which, as explained below, will deprive the manufacturer of constitutionally protected property rights and market-based pricing. for the selected drugs. 2, incur crippling penalties for failing to agree to that deprivation. Or 3, withdraw its portfolio of treatments from Medicare and Medicaid entirely. The government has persisted in telling the public that manufacturers have the option of choosing among these crippling outcomes and that participation in the program is voluntary. Revised guidance supra, but it is clear that the program was specifically designed with only one outcome in mind: forced participation in the program on terms a manufacturer cannot refuse. All right, let's see. We're almost done here, I promise you. I know reading this kind of stuff can be boring, but how else will you know what your government is up to? Here, the act violates Jansen's constitutional rights. This is the last bit. The program violates Jansen's constitutional rights in at least 3 respects. First, the program will appropriate Janssen patent Xarelto, I think it's how you say it, products for third-party use without providing adequate compensation or clear physical taking in violation of the Fifth Amendment. So remember, he wanted her to answer all these questions like, how is this a taking? It's listed right here in a document that was filed months before the hearing that he attended. If he wanted these answers, he had access to them. He just wanted to grandstand and make it look like he was doing something because he was grandstanding about something that was not even what people were there to do. And like I say, so let's see. Second, the program will violate the First Amendment by compelling Janssen to make false and misleading statements through the manufacturer agreement, including that the program will involve negotiating a fair price for Xarelto products. So in other words, in order for them to participate, they have to agree to something that they believe is false. They have to say, yes, we negotiate, we participated in this negotiation program from the government when the government gave them no opportunity to actually negotiate. Do you know what a negotiation is? I want to sell my car for $500. You come to me and you say, will you take 450? And then I say, I don't know if I'll take 450. Maybe I'll take 475. And I tell you what, I'll throw in a couple seat covers, right? Whatever, right? That is a negotiation where we literally debate the terms before we agree on whatever it is that we're going to do. All right. Third, the act would violate Janssen's constitutional rights, even if participation in the program were voluntary. It is not, by impermissibly conditioning Janssen's ability to participate in Medicare and Medicaid on Janssen's relinquishing its speech and property rights. So in some way, and I'm not getting into all of it, in some way, it tells them by participating, you can't say this, right? Like the Fifth Amendment prohibits the government from taking private property without compensating the owner for the full and fair value of that property. So the argument here is the government wants to pay a certain price and for the product, but they're determining that this is how much we're willing to pay. And if you don't pay, well, then here's what you can expect. Here is the punishment that you're going to receive, right? We're going to fine you if you continue to participate, or you can withdraw from the program altogether, which means you don't get any share of the money from these particular products and you have to sell them on the market, right? Now, again, we can have a conversation at some other time about, how this, about the system in general. But the way that the government is presenting this is if they're the good guys. I love this quote from Thomas Sowell, an economist who has made this point a lot of regarding the government and these kind of situations. They're not trying to lower the price. They're not trying to lower the cost. They're refusing to pay it. That's what the government is doing. And they're pretending they're doing otherwise. They need to be held accountable. And unfortunately, these kind of proceedings are kind of dry and boring. Reading through this information is dry and boring. So hopefully people like me who are doing the footwork are presenting it in an interesting way so that you can become more informed. Because if it cost $1 billion, and by the way, you can actually go Google, like, how much does the average drug cost to bring to market? The average is about $1 billion. right? It's literally about $1 billion. Think about that. Uh, if the cost is $1 billion to bring a drug to market, and I try to bring 10 drugs to market, that's $10 billion. But assume that only 2 of them end up being profitable. That means I've spent $10 billion for 2 drugs that might be profitable, the other 2 drugs, which may not be for any number of reasons, right? Maybe it doesn't pass FDA approval. Maybe it turns out that the path that they were going down turns out this drug is actually a terrible drug, and is really dangerous. So we can't use it at all. There are other cases where a drug has been researched and developed for one particular purpose, but then they found out, like, actually, it turns out this drug is not so good for that purpose, but it's good for another purpose, right? There was a drug, Zyban. When I was in 2002, when I was stationed in Bosnia, the military offered Zyban to all the soldiers to, it was a smoking cessation drug. We got it for free. Free meaning the taxpayers paid for it. I didn't have to pay for it. Okay, no cost to me. So Zyban, as we learned, was a drug that had been produced for depression. And what they found out during the study of this is that depressed patients with depression, were not being cured of depression, but they ended up quitting smoking. And so then the researchers looked and said, "Oh wow, turns out this is a good smoking cessation drug." Now, the question is, which would have been more profitable if this drug had been valuable for depression, or if it had been valuable for smoking cessation? Which one? Which one provides more value to the company, right? The cost to produce that drug remained the same no matter which direction that it took. It doesn't matter whether it ended up being good for depression or whether it ended up being good for smoking cessation. It still cost the same. It cost the same amount of money to gather the materials, to pay researchers, to go and do testing, to test it on mice or whatever it is that they do, right? All of those things were the same cost regardless of what it was used for. Now, imagine that the drug had not been useful for anything. The cost would have been the same. This is what I mean. The government is not willing to pay the cost. They're trying to shortchange the pharmaceutical companies by saying, we're going to pay this much or else. They're not making the drugs cheaper. They're just refusing to pay the cost. And you know what happens? That cost will be borne somewhere else. If I own a hardware store and the government comes along and says, we want to buy rakes, right? We're going to subsidize rakes. And I want to sell the rakes for $10 a piece. And the government says, yeah, no, we're only going to pay you $1. And if you don't agree to this, well, then everything else that we buy from you, you can't sell to us anymore. So therefore you lose a big share of what made you these profits, right? And so then let's say that I agree to it. Let's say, okay, I'm going to sell these rakes to you for $1 a piece. Now I'm going to be making $9 less in my gross revenue. My revenue is taking a hit. Now, what do you think is going to happen? The other items that I sell, either maybe to the government, because in this particular case, the government has said, we are going to choose like certain drugs that we're going to force you to pay, to provide to us for a lesser price. So for the drugs that aren't going to be a lesser price, I'm going to raise the prices on those. Or if I can't do that, I'll raise the price on drugs that are explicitly on the free market. Somebody somewhere is going to pay, because that money that they were making doesn't just go and sit in a bank like it's Scrooge McDuck. It goes toward the $108 billion that they spent over 10 years researching new drugs. It goes toward the next big thing. Okay. This is the problem. And this is why Representative Khanna, as I said, his constituents, and I'll say it again, they need to physically go grab him and toss him out on his ass for this. Why? Why would I make such a strong statement? Because Congress has a limit on what they should be doing when it comes to our rights. It's enshrined in the Constitution. He is deceiving the American people, the people that he represents, by suggesting that he's doing his job and that Johnson and Johnson is, maliciously just suing the government for no good reason because it's obviously fair, right? What they're doing. It's obviously a negotiation. No, sir, it is not. And you are lying to the American public. You are taking the property of somebody else. Let's make this point really quickly because we got to wrap it up. If Congress can bulldoze and take property from a multi-billion-dollar company, what can they do to you? Do you have the resources to fight any better than Johnson and Johnson? No, you do not. That means all they've got to do is continue what they're doing, being deceitful to the American public, grandstanding and not doing their jobs, and they get away with it. And the way that you can respond, the way they stop getting away with it, responds and throws them out on their ass, period. That's what needs to happen. And when it does happen, we will get a better Congress. All right, folks. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode and I hope you found it informative and inspiring. I want you to be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And then again on Sundays at 7 p.m. with my co-host, Susan Hogarth, as we discuss LP happenings. We look across the vast tyranny, as I clearly showed, in this country, and we identify what it is that the Libertarian Party is up to, and we bring that information to you to inspire you about what's going on elsewhere and to give you ideas that you can implement in your own city. I want you to make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, my Rumble channel. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. Make sure you subscribe, and while you're there, throw me a comment and let me know how I'm doing. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you are a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.